Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Journey to Purpose. With me today, I have the wonderful Cristina Rodrigues. She is a parent coach who specializes in children between the ages of 3 to 6 years old. Cristina, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
First, really easy question is where in the world are you?
I'm in Germany. I'm actually Portuguese, but I live in Germany.
Wonderful, wonderful combination of languages and weather between the two countries.
Well, German is really hard to learn. It's I mean, my son, because he speaks it since he was born, it was very easy for him. But for me, it was really, really hard to learn.
Well, it's also like you speak English as well as everything else. Europeans always put British people to shame with just the range of languages that you guys can do. So
You end up, it's very rare that an European person only speaks one language. You always end up speaking more. It's just the way it is, isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely. So you are a parent coach. What is a parent coach?
So basically, I help because there is this idea that once we become parents, the day we get pregnant, suddenly it's like we are struck by a magic lightning that tells us everything about childhood development and tells us everything about how to be a parent. And it's actually really sad that we don't really learn that until we are parents. And we are supposed to just learn as we go. Everyone says you will learn as you go, but it's really, really hard. I mean, even if you already have, like, I actually studied childhood development, I have all this theoretical knowledge, and I still find parenting challenge because I'm a mom, and it's by definition parenting is challenge. But if you are really just going, doing it as you go, it's so much more challenging than it needs to be, because very often we are just reacting, first of all, mindlessly to our emotions because we get triggered by our children, which is just a human response. But also we try to focus a lot on solving the immediate behavior, what we are seeing in the moment, instead of actually trying to address the needs behind the behavior. Why is the child behaving like that? So the behavior just keeps on going and it keeps getting more and more frustrating. And this together with all the, judgment, because especially people without kids, they are perfect parents always. They always know what to do. It's always like, if it was my kid, and it's really hard as a parent to deal with all these, with our own emotions. And that's what I help parents do. I help parents parent in a way that is both kind and firm, while also really taking care of their own needs, because we are not just moms, we are also people. And sometimes we forget that, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said you studied a lot on sort of early development and the psychology around it. What took you down that path? Have you always had an interest in sort of child development?
No, not at all. I didn't even know what a parent, everything I knew about parent, like most people, it was just by seeing other parents do it. As I grew, seeing my aunts take care of my cousins and all that, I didn't even know there was such thing as, I didn't know what positive parenting was, what gentle parenting was. I didn't know any of those things. It was actually when I became pregnant that I started, like most women when we are pregnant, right? We are nesting and we start learning everything, how to bathe the baby. And that's when I came across positive parenting. And I was like, hey, I think this is really useful. That's how I want to parent myself. So I first started learning for myself because I wanted to learn how to do it. But then I really liked it so much that I decided to get all these certifications that I have nowadays and start actually helping parents. Because I do think that it makes such a big difference when you have the knowledge and the help, not just the knowledge from reading a book, but actually having someone to help you, look at what's happening and say, oh, this is because of that. And if you only do this, it will make such a big difference. And I find that it just makes such a big difference because it's not just on the relationship we have with our children, because of course that changes, right? Because we don't feel like we're always screaming at our kids or that we are always losing our patience with our kids, but that we are actually giving them life skills that help them throughout their lives, but also for ourselves, because we don't feel like such crappy parents all the time, because we will always feel like crappy parents and we will always make mistakes and we will always screw up. That's inevitable because we are human and by definition imperfect. But it's so much better when we don't have this all or nothing approach to parenting, when we have someone to show us, look, you're also doing great in this and this and that. And look how great you did this now. And you go to bed feeling like you did actually something and you helped your child and you gave them life skills. This makes a difference, not just in the relationship you have with your child, but in the relationship you have with yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And you talk about positive parenting a lot. So what is positive parenting for those who don't know?
So positive parenting is a way of it's actually what's recommended by the American Association of Pediatrics, the World Health Organization, and a lot of other associations. And it's basically just being both kind and firm at the same time. Some people call it positive parenting, others call it mindful parenting, others call it gentle parenting, it's respectful parenting. But basically, the idea is to be both kind and firm at the same time. So when you think about it, there's basically 4 types of parenting. When you have a parent that is very kind but is not firm, this is permissive parent, right? This is those parents that really feel with their children and it really hurts them, because all parenting comes from ourselves, right? Unfortunately, we all wish that we were parenting what our children need of us, but we all will always parent based a lot on our own emotions and on our own experiences. That's just human nature, right? So very often, parents that are permissive, what happens is that they themselves feel it so strongly. It's so hard for them. It's like when their children are hurt, they feel hurt. When their children are sad, they feel sad. And they just want to stop that as fast as possible because it hurts them physically. They are so empathic. They really are kind, really very kind to their children. They empathize a lot, but they aren't able to be firm also. To do the firm part, also to impose limits, because they just want to stop that. So they just give in to their children. Look, have the toy. Don't cry. It's okay. Look, you can have the toy. Because it gives them that immediate release of tension in their own body at the moment. And that's why whenever I coach parents, it's not just about the child's behavior. It's really important to work on ourselves also. I always work on both things because we need to learn what's causing the behavior. Why is the child having a tantrum because they need a car? It's not just because you are a permissive parent. It's also because they have a need behind it. So you need to address both things. What you are feeling, self-regulation, and also what the child is feeling. So permissive parent is a parent that is very kind and not firm. Then on the opposite end, we have authoritarian parenting, which are, most of us grew with that type of parenting, which are very, very firm, very, very strong boundaries, but not very kind. So I really don't care what you're feeling. You will do as I say because I'm the boss around here. And this type of parenting happens also, it might seem weird, but it's also because those parents have a hard time also dealing with their own emotions. They don't feel it in the same way as the permissive parents. So the permissive parents, they actually, when the child is sad, they feel sad. An authoritarian parent, when the child is having a tantrum, they feel personally attacked. So you are triggering me. You are causing this on me. I want you to stop that. And you will do as I say, stop. It's basically like that. So authoritarian parents, they need to have this control. And the way they exert this control is by being very, very firm, which is good for children. They need firm limits, but they are not kind. They don't empathize with their child's emotions. They let the children deal with their emotions by themselves. Go to the bedroom. When you stop crying, come back. So the child is supposed to learn how to self-regulate by themselves, which of course also turns into unhealthy behaviors that many of us struggle with nowadays, right? Then you have neglectful parenting. These are parents that are neither kind nor firm. These are parents that are so overwhelmed with their own emotions that they are just unavailable to parent. And all of us, by the way, we all circle between these types of parents. None of us is 100% any of those parents. There are always moments in our lives that every single parent out there will be neglectful. Because we are also people, we also have emotions, and sometimes everything is just too much. And sometimes you are just like, you know what, just go and watch a screen because I can't deal with this anymore. And there are unfortunately parents that are in that mode, and it's really sad, and those people really need support, and that's how neglectful parenting happens. And in the opposite of that, you have then positive parenting, which is both kind and firm. So this is basically empathizing with your child, helping your child deal with their emotions, showing them that it's normal to feel those emotions, that is part of being human. We all feel sad sometimes. We all feel angry sometimes. You felt angry because the tower fell down. And it's really frustrating when the tower, you're trying so hard to build a tower and then the tower falls down, and it's so frustrating. I also feel like that sometimes. Everyone feels like that sometimes. The other day this happened to me, and it, like really empathizing. And then when your child self-regulates, when they are able to feel less in fight or flight mode, when their emotions are not in control of their being, that's when you go into the firm part and you teach them how to deal with that emotion in a healthy way, in a way that is socially acceptable. When I'm upset, when you're upset, and because the tower, it's so frustrating and the tower, this is happening, what can you do? You can ask for help, you can do this, you can do that, you can jump around if you're feeling too much energy, you can punch a pillow if you need to. What you cannot do is throw the toys, because if you throw the toys first, you can break the toys, you can hit someone, blah, 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 blah. So it needs to be both kind and firm at the same time.
A lot, isn't it? When you break it down like that, and you talk about moving between each one as well. I mean, just hearing that makes me exhausted, going, this is the emotional roller coaster of a parent, let alone the child.
Yeah. And it's really like important that we remember we are people, because very often, especially moms, we have these impossible expectations we set up for ourselves. Oh, because I need to bake like a biological, organic, whatever cake for the kindergarten. Otherwise, they think I'm a bad mom. And I also need to have my house clean because, otherwise they might think I'm a pig. And also, I need to, and you don't need to do anything. And actually, one of the exercises I sometimes do with my clients is I tell them, like, what do you think you need to do? Now, really go into each one of these things. Do you really? Because you will find out that most things that we think we need to do, we don't really need to do.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine to just buy a cake and bring it to the kindergarten. What's the worst that can happen? Like, what's the worst? And if one day, your house, or even a week, your house is not perfect, if no one is seeing it, like, it's much more important that you're able to help your child go through their emotions, that you have time for yourself, because this is really important. Every mom needs time for ourselves. Some people more than others, but every single person. We always think that we belong to the bottom of the list. First the house, then the child, but it's actually, we need to be on top of the list, because you cannot be a good mom, you cannot be a good wife, you cannot be good to your coworkers, you cannot be good to yourself unless you're in a good set of mindset, unless you are feeling good. And feeling good is something that you can have control over if you practice mindfulness. Even if you just go to the bathroom and take some deep breaths, the way you will respond to your child will be so much different than when you're constantly on edge. Your cup is almost like really just one more drop and you will explode. It's very different. So it's really important to have self-care.
Absolutely. Do you think, I just think back to, when I was growing up, and I'm sure there were books on child psychology and parent psychology, but it wasn't something as, I'd say, as mainstream as it is now. Have you seen in your experience sort of a shift towards this naturally fueled by, I don't know, social media, or is it just that we are more aware in general and therefore people care more? I think it feels to me like there's always been pressure to be a parent, but there hasn't been a billion books telling you how to do it. But now there is.
Yeah, I think that I always say this. I think that parenting was so much easier in the time of our parents. First of all, your whole source of information was the pediatrician. That was it. There was no internet. So if your child had a rash, you would go to the pediatrician, he would say, it's this, you would believe it, it's that. Nowadays you have Google, right? So there's a rash and immediately you go on Google and everyone starts saying your children is dying. And it's just so much pressure, right? Then on top of that, when in the time of our parents, it was just a very normal thing that there were no seat belts. At my time, there were no seat belts in the car. So of course there were not even child seats, right? It was just a normal thing that you would tell your, 8-year-old, go outside, come at night. When it's dark, that's when you have to come. And the parents had no idea where kids were, right? And nowadays there's these GPS tracking devices, and it's just everything is so much more. In the old days, it was normal thing. For instance, my parents would go to the supermarket and we would stay in the car. Nowadays, that would be constituted a crime, right? So that's a crime. They would take your kids away if you would do that, right? You cannot just leave your kids in the car and go to the supermarket. But it was just, everything was so much easier. And also, people were not really, they didn't have the knowledge, again, because everything came more from their pediatrician, from the way their parents dealt with them. So it was just kind of like an ongoing cycle. And of course, every parent tries to do better than their parents did with them. But it was just like a very slow process. And the moment the internet came and people started accessing, like, there's so much more out there. And we get access to medical research, for instance, which was something we didn't have access before, right? Because before, you would only have access to research if it was, in the news somehow. And if it was not necessarily newsworthy, unless it was something that would interest the masses. And besides, that is also not usually the people who consume the. So nowadays, everyone has access to more research on childhood psychology. There's also more interest in doing that because people started feeling interested in that and they have access to more things. So it's kind of a snowball. And I think it's a great time now. And I see a lot, it really melts my heart whenever I see on social media, for instance, a father that has his nails colored. I always am like, it just heals my inner heart, because my father would never have done that,
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just reflecting then, like I remember walking down like the road to the shop with my sister, and I can't have been older than 7, and she wouldn't have been older than 9. And this was in North London at the time, busy place. Didn't think anything of it. And in fact, we moved again. My family moved quite a lot, and I would go out on my bike all day. I would walk to primary school, which is like, the 3 to 11 in the UK. I'd walk there on my own from about the age of 7 as well, I think. And it was, actually, I tell you a lie, I wasn't supposed to walk on my own. I was supposed to walk to a neighbour's house, and with that neighbour, we'd walk to another neighbour's house. But when we did that, they had a dog I was scared of. So I'd often like walk straight to school to skip this dog that I was scared of rather than walk to my neighbour's house. And then if they weren't there, I'd then walk back and go, oh, sorry, I missed you. Anyway, so I would do like a 2 mile walk in the morning on my own as a 7-year-old and not even think about it. And my parents, were quite happy with that as well. I mean, I'm sure they did worry. Now you kind of get this whole, like I said, the GPS, is it safe? But I remember meeting my friends and you'd make a phone call and then you'd turn up at that time and then hopefully they were there. And if the bus wasn't late or something else, how do you think we can navigate I guess it feels like the trust has gone in other people, right? The
I
trust
think
that you
it's
let your
more than
children
the
go.
trust. I think it's not just the trust, it's more that we have the knowledge. Because the time of our parents, it was not like something that they actually thought was a possibility that
Yeah.
a child would get kidnapped. For them, it was something that happens in the news. Nowadays, we get bombarded by all these safety measurements that are not just something that parents are scared of and they want to do, but we are actually expected to implement these safety measurements as parents. Very often, when we don't implement, like nowadays, if you would let, like you were saying, a 7-year-old go through the middle of busy London by themselves and a police would spot the child, probably they would call child services or the
Yeah.
parents. So it's not just that the parents are, because there is a lot this idea, especially because we were raised by boomers, and boomers were parents in a very different time and age than it is nowadays, that we get judged by being helicopter parents. You're an helicopter parent, just let the child do it. But they don't understand that there are implications of us. We just cannot afford to have the same parenting style they had, because there would
Mm.
be serious implications for us. So what is expected of us is very different than what was expected of them. So parenting is much harder nowadays. And I think that this is the first generation where it's really, really hard to be a parent, because not always only we have all the judgment, because again, the previous generation had they don't understand why we need to do the things we do now. But second, because we are aware of childhood development and other things through social media and other methods, that now we want to do differently, but we were not raised in that way. So we ourselves need to learn how to self-regulate and how
Mm.
to be to our children something no one was to us. And this is really, really hard. And do these at the same time that people are actually judging us and being like, the child is like that. So I remember seeing on social media this mom that the child got stuck in one of those, in the county fairs where they have these machines that they have a hook to grab the
Oh
little
yeah, yeah,
toys.
yeah, yeah.
And the child somehow managed to enter through the little door where the toy comes out, and he entered inside. And the mom, she was really trying to calm the child down, and she was really trying to keep herself calm. And I can't imagine how hard it must have been.
Mm.
And then there were two workers that were literally screaming at the mom and the child, being like, how could you let this happen? Look at what you did. Now we have to call the firemen. And then I go on the comments of the video, and there were tons of people saying things like, well, the mom is so chill. She's so, mindful and whatever. I'm sure she won't mind paying the bill. Things like that. And they cannot
Yeah,
understand how hard it is for that mom, but
yeah,
it is the world we live in. And I think when it's the time of our children to be parents, it will be very different, because they will have us as the grandparents and we will have much more empathy for what they are. But right now, I think this is one of the reasons why it's so hard. And the other reason is because the world our children are being raised in is so different from the world we were raised in,
mm.
that we just don't have the knowledge to help them through it. Because I got the phone when I was 17. It was the first time I had the phone.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
The internet I had the internet for the first time when I was 14, and it was very, very basic. It was just like basically like, Windows
You could send an
Explorer.
email.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just very, very
so
basic.
basic. Yeah,
There
I
was no
remember that.
social media. There was MySpace and IRC or something like that. So we didn't really grow up with this. And my 4-year-old son speaks with Alexa. So it's such a different
Yeah,
it's very hard for us to understand, and it's also very hard for us to prepare for the dangers, because those dangers are just appearing now, so there are still not so many laws in place to protect our children from them. So it's a really, really hard time to be a parent, I think.
Do you know what? There was a story in the UK, maybe last year, I can't remember. There's a TV personality. Don't ask me to because I didn't know who she was, but I know she's a TV personality. And she let her son, who was 16, I think, go off backpacking around Europe. And she got torn apart. She was like, "How irresponsible are you?" And I'm like, "I think this is great. I think this is a great experience. 16, you're allowed to smoke and, I don't know, have sex. So why can't you go and visit a foreign country on your own?" But yeah, you're right. The internet trolls tore her apart, and someone reported her to child services.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that feels like a very, very vindictive thing. I think that's someone who didn't like her as a TV personality, maybe. But I'm like, I think sending a 16-year-old to another country for the summer to let him wander around and learn things. It's not like he hasn't got a mobile phone these days. I lived abroad when I was at university, and I didn't have a very functional mobile phone. So my calls home were like once a month on the, one of those prepaid cards and in a phone box, or I'd go to an internet cafe and send an email once a week or something. Like, it is so much, it's so, from that point of view, it's so easier to be accessible now than it was when we were growing up. And yet, you're right, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Whatever you do, someone's going to judge you.
Yeah, that's why I always say it's better to be judged for doing what you believe in, because you will
Yeah.
be judged for whatever you do anyway as a parent. That's just 100%. But what you were saying about that person, that famous person, the difference is that famous person has probably money to pay a big lawyer, right? And most parents, this is something that really scares most parents. That it's actually something that our parents didn't have to worry about, and in our day and age, most parents actually think about it. What if someone
Mm,
says something to child services? It's just something that people think about. So this is not
yeah.
something that our parents even had to, it was just a foreign concept for them. And also
Yeah.
what you were saying about having phones. I think for a teenager nowadays, this is a completely different world. I remember seeing this video on TikTok or something. It was a teenager and they were high on the subway. They had smoked a joint or something. And then immediately when the door stopped, they went into this mode of like being completely aware of their situation and completely in focus of what they were doing. It's like they managed to snap out of it. And there were many comments on explaining that this is how the generation nowadays deals with it. And it's because, or like for instance, the fact that they don't dance when they go to nightclubs and they just sit there. They just stay very quietly, because nowadays everything is videotaped.
Yeah.
And your parents can find out, your schoolmates can find out of anything bad that you do. So you have to constantly be very aware of what's happening. And I think
Yeah.
that creates a lot of anxiety. And it's something that as parents, it will be always very hard for us to understand firsthand, because we didn't go through that, right? Because
Yeah.
when you were a kid, you just did whatever you wanted. And your parents would probably never find out. No one would ever find out, because, there were no cameras, there was nothing, right?
This is such a good point. And I've said it many times before. I am so glad I did not grow up with social media. I love what the internet can do for us. It can connect people, but it also, my God, opens up a world of judgment. And I keep going, well, I know how shy, introverted, uncomfortable I was as a teenager anyway. Imagine going through that on a sphere of anybody and everyone can watch you in your worst moments. I mean, it's terrible. You're completely right.
Yeah, and by the way, all the research points, if there are any parents listening that have teenagers, all the research points that children under the age of 15, and 15 is like a lot, right? 15 should not have access to social media. And by
Mm,
social media, they mean anything that have social interaction, such as Roblox or,
Roblox, yeah.
yeah, all those things that exist nowadays, that again, for us as parents are very hard to keep track of all these things, because I even heard there is this guy I follow on Facebook. He's called Officer Gomez. I recommend every parent to listen to him. So he basically gives safety tips to parents on everything, but special social media. And he was explained, I think it was him who explained that even on Pinterest, it's possible to communicate, and that there are like bad people that talk with your children in a bad way through things that seem so harmless.
Yeah, I mean that is scary stuff. Now you focus particularly on the 3 to 6 year old range. What about why do you do that age range?
Well, I'm going to be honest, because my son is 4.
It's fine.
Yeah. So before I used to do toddlers, so until
Yeah,
he turned 3, and now I do preschoolers, so 3 to 6. But actually, I think that ages 3 to 6 are a really important age group in terms of development, because it is in this great age group that children develop their core beliefs. So it's when they develop these core belief systems about who they are, what they expect of other people, and how the world works. And of course, this will slightly change or more or less as they grow, but those really core beliefs, am I a good person? Am I a bad person? That's why it's really important for young children to never say, you're bad, you're being a bad kid, because they are not being a bad kid, right? They are doing something bad. And it's really important to differentiate between doing something and being something, right? Because we also do that. And this is something that we do that also nowadays, right? As the adults, something happens and you say, I am so stupid. And the reason you think that, right, is because when you were little, your parents weren't constantly correcting you and saying, you are not stupid, you did something stupid. And it's really important, especially in this age group, that we are constantly correcting our children. Whenever they say something about themselves or the others or how the world works that is incorrect, that we immediately correct the thought. Because it's really important that they form these core beliefs that they are good people, that everyone does something bad, that it's okay to ask for help, because many of us nowadays have a problem asking for help, because when we were kids, and this happens a lot with children of boomers, because boomers, they were the same way that we are taught nowadays all these things about safety. For them, in their time, what was like the worst thing you could do to a child was to spoil a child. So it was really important you would not spoil the child. That's why sometimes they still say those things nowadays as grandparents, you're spoiled, because for them it was really important that children learn not to be self-sufficient, independent, which made us, most of us, be able to do many great things nowadays, right? And it's still something we want to pass along to our children, but it's also important to teach our children that it's okay to ask for help, that it's not a sign of there's something wrong with you or that you are weak, or so the way we should do this in this age group about the help is always to say, you are doing great, you are trying, do you want to continue trying? You can continue trying, and if you at any point need help, I'm here. So not to say, do you want me to help you? Because sometimes when we say, do you need help, they immediately think they are not good enough to do it. But instead to tell them that if they need help, you are there, and that they should ask you. This way, you're also teaching them how to ask for help. So this age group 3 to 6 is really important to help our children have this foundation of who they will become as grown-ups, all their values, all those little life skills of problem solving, even social skills, because around the age of 4, that's when children start developing social relationships. Friendship and all that is later, around 5, 6, right? But even like a 3-year-old, they already start slowly forming social relationships, and they start learning this thing of like taking turns, sharing. And these are skills that we think is just for children, but they are not. They are really important as we grow also.
Absolutely. I mean, I know from a psychology point of view, the first 7 years are said to be the formative years, aren't they? So I totally see how that 3 to 6, you've got more language skills, you've got that interaction coming around. I can see how it makes a difference. So how do you work with people? How do you parent coach? How does that work?
So basically, what happens is that we start by, I start by learning the situation, everything, because I think that most parents, what they need is not more, you need to do like this, or, because for that they could also just read a book, right? And the reason why most of the times the books don't work, or the advice that people find on the internet doesn't work, is because it's not really focused on their specific situation, right? On their specific child. And, it's like, you can say, it's very easy when you're an outsider to say, well, you just need to do this because that's what worked for you, right? So you just immediately are like, why don't you just do this? And it usually just upsets the people, the parents even more, right? Because they feel like misunderstood. So that's why it's so important. And it takes a long time to really try and understand the situation itself about their shield. So they start by filling out a big form about their specific family situation, their specific child, themselves, what's hard for them in parenting. Because parenting is not just a one-sided thing, right? It's like I said, it's about the parent itself, the mom and the child. It's the two things. You need to find out the two needs, both of them. Only then can you actually change the behavior. So when I have a big understanding of everything, then I still don't form a plan immediately. That's when we actually meet, we have our appointment, and we start by really like, share with me the last time that this happened. Tell me exactly what happened, I want to understand. And how did that make you feel? And then I go through all the feelings that the mom is feeling. Because that's a really, that really helps. That's usually a part that is very, very helpful right in the beginning. Because very often what happens is that parenting is very focused on the child. what does the child need? Let's focus on the behavior. But actually, it's really important that we focus on ourselves, as I explained earlier, because we are also people and we also deserve to have help. It's not just about helping our children grow healthy. It's about us also enjoying parenting, because it's a lovely thing. Parenting is like the best job in the world and also the most demanding, isn't it? So it's really important we make parenting as enjoyable as possible for our own personality, because every person is different. Some people get more overstimulated, some people get more. So you need to address that so you can make parenting more enjoyable. Then I help them understand. So then we do the role playing, where they go into their child's shoes, and go through the situation, because sometimes it's hard for us to understand the world through our children's viewpoint. And these role-playing exercises really help, because it makes them understand why their child is reacting like that. And then I actually go into childhood psychology and I teach them what is really the needs behind it and what's causing the behavior, what type of things they should avoid doing to avoid making the behavior worse, and what type of things would actually help address the needs so that the behavior doesn't even happen in the future or happens as little as possible. And then I tell them several things that they can do, and they choose one that they enjoy the most. And then what I do is I help them role play again, but this time in the role of the mom, and I'm the child, and they are implementing that with me. And I try and make it a little hard so that they really get that real life feeling of going through the situation. So they have all the tools they need and can ask me all the questions. So they really feel prepared to implement it in real life. And then they have 1 month. Well, throughout the month, they get all these tasks, so one task at a time, and they implement it with their child. They tell me how it goes. We have chat support, and throughout the month we really go and implement every single step by step, and I'm there every step of the way, implementing with them, helping them fine-tune what's not working, answering all their questions. And I guarantee that at the end of the month their child behavior improved or they get their money back. That's how I work.
Pretty awesome. Have you ever seen those TV shows like Super Nanny? Don't know if you get that in Germany. What do you think about those kind of shows? Do you think they're helpful, or do you think they set unreasonable expectations?
Well, I don't like to talk ill of other people, or each person their own, but I personally, because I believe in positive parenting, and one of the things that positive parenting, and again, it's what's recommended by American Academy of Pediatrics, so it's not just me saying, rewards and punishments are not something we want to give to our children. Because when you punish a child, when you tell your child, go and sit over there and think about what you did. And if you ever experienced that yourself as a child, you know that that doesn't work. Because you are not going there to the corner thinking about, I shouldn't have thrown the toy on the floor. Because when I throw the toy on the floor, I can break the toy. I need to do this differently. Next time I need to breathe, take 3 deep breaths, and I need to jump around. They don't think like that. They think, I'm an awful kid. I'm so bad that mommy doesn't want to be with me right now. I am feeling all this, and this is bad. It's bad to feel like this, and I have to deal with all this by myself. No one is going to help me. And children will stop crying, and they will, do what you want them to do. Not because they understand the reason why they need to do it. Not because they understand what is an appropriate way to respond to their emotions and how to deal with their emotions and self-regulation skills, problem-solving skills. They are not learning any of those things. They are behaving because they fear you. Not only is that not something that you want to do as a parent, because that's not the reason why you became a parent, for sure, to make your child scared of you, but also you want your child to do those things whether you're there or not, right? Because if they only do things because they fear what will happen if someone finds out, then what they learn is how to do things in a way that no one finds out, right? And that's not what you want to teach them, right? You're teaching them the wrong skills. You're damaging your relationship with your child. And worst, you are teaching them that there's something wrong with them that they have to deal with by themselves. And these will always lead to unhealthy ways to deal with our emotions. That's why many of us growing up, we feel the need to have a cigarette or have a glass of wine whenever something bad happens. That's why we lie in bed watching Bridget Jones and eating ice cream when we, because we didn't learn how to deal with those emotions in a healthy way growing up.
I mean, like a lot of the work I do, I think comes down to people who don't know how to handle emotions. Completely agree. And I think mental health comes from emotional health. And if you can solve that emotional health problem, if you understand how to regulate, if you understand how to manage your emotions, then not everyone, But I think a significant proportion of people in later life avoid those mental health challenges because they just understand emotions better. A lot of people I work with have been just don't know how to express themselves, and it bottles up and it has to go somewhere. And so it causes depression, it causes a lack of focus, all these different things. So I mean, it goes back to how important it is to get it right in those first 7 years. But also, as you say, except you're probably not going to get it 100% right. But if you can find that balance.
Yeah, it's like you will always screw up as a parent, but you always have to think what is. So it's like you can never be a perfect parent, because there are no perfect parents, because all parents are humans and by definition imperfect, right? So you will always need time for yourself. You will always need times where you're like, screw it, I just don't care. Do whatever you want. I just need time for myself right now. There will always be times when you know what is the right thing to do, but you just can't do it. And that's okay. That's normal. That's part of being human, right? Deep down, we need to think about what is that I want to teach my child? What is that I want to give my child? Do I want to tell my child that they need to obey their elders, which is what most of us were taught with, right? You need to obey your elders. Regardless of what you think is right, you need to do what you are told. And by the way, I don't want to enter into politics right now, but this is what a capitalistic society wants from their citizens, right? That you just obey and do what you're told without questioning, right? And you just perform what is expected of you without much resistance. But actually, as a parent, that's not what you want, right? You want your child, when an adult asks them to do something, and especially in this day and age, an adult asks them to do something they don't feel comfortable with, that they say, I am not comfortable with that. This is not okay for me. That they learn not to impose boundaries. And how do they learn that? By doing that with you, right? You need to be able to allow yourself to say no to you. You need to be able to allow your child to decide things in your family because they are part of your family. You need to let them sometimes decide, I don't know, what. Again, it's very important to give them age appropriate power, right? And power that is okay for you. So if you're giving them choices, you need to be okay with every single one of the options, right? So you're not going to say you can choose what you have for dessert, because otherwise it will just say chocolate, unless you're okay with the chocolate, right? But you can say you can choose any of the fruits in the supermarket and this will be our dessert today, right? Because this would be a choice you would be okay with, and you're giving them age appropriate power that they feel they are in control. So it's okay to teach our children also to say no. It's also like, for instance, if you are having a sibling fight, you should never take sides or intervene in a way that you are telling them what needs to happen. So you're not going to say, now no one has the toy, or now no, give the toy to your children, to your sister back, or whatever. Instead, you need to each one of them teach them what it is that you would wish they would do by themselves, right? So you need to tell the sister, you need to say no to your brother. So put your hand like this and say, no, this is my doll. And you need to tell your son to be like, when you want to play with the doll, you need to say, can I play? Can we take turns? So you are basically like coaching each one of your childs individually instead of actually intervening to solve the problem, because only then will you, and this is much harder, of course. It's much easier to just go there, take out the toy and say, now you both grounded. Authoritarian parenting was so much easier. That's why I always say parenting in the old days was so much easier, but we need to think about the skills we want to give to our children.
Definitely. I thought we could talk forever, but we don't have time. If people want to find you or learn more or work with you, how can they do that?
Changingparenting.com. And if you go to the free section, you will find a lot of free resources there. Also, my free group on Facebook, there's a lot of stuff there.
Amazing. I'll put it all in the show notes. Cristina, this has been so interesting. Thank you ever so much for your time. And
thank you for having me.
No, thank you.